Yeah, hi everyone. Nice to see so many of you here. Just to let you know, I am recording this, so feel free to interrupt with questions. If I'll try and cut things out if I can, but the bulk of the session will be recorded, and I will put it up later. Okay. So I'm assuming most of you have done at least one of these sessions, so you'll know that the format is generally I give you some material to work with, and then we do the sort of practice the techniques on that. So if you're following along in real time, can you please go to the link here, https://tinyurl.com cpeters2021, and download the folder in the Premiere Sessions folder, and I will show you where that is if I can stop sharing that. Looks good. So there's the folder. It's the Premiere Sessions folder. And we're looking at number 4, colour. There's 3 things in there: colour grading, colour match, colour correction, and we will need to use all 3. Okay, so while that's downloading for you, I'm just going to talk you through a few things, what the point of the session today is and how it's going to work. So I wanted to give you some context for colour within film specifically. Now I know you're graphic students, I know therefore you will have done colour theory, you'll have a good idea of how colours are put together anyway. You're artists, it's part of your thing. But there's different aspects to colour in film, and I just wanted to draw your attention to them so that you understand what we're doing when we then process our colours on Premiere Pro in a minute. So, colour in film, there are 3 different techniques we're going to use to deal with 3 different things. So, colour correction, colour theory, and colour grading, and I'll talk you through all 3. So colour correction kind of speaks for itself. It is where you take something that's been recorded on a camera, the colour's not particularly good or it's not realistic, and you adjust it to make it more realistic. So people with very orange faces, or when you get red eye in your photographs, you could put those into something like Photoshop and adjust them so that they look more realistic. So that's colour correction. And we can do that in Premiere Pro quite easily. So this picture here, it's very dull, the light's a bit dark and there's a lot of shadow. So it's just been colour corrected in probably Photoshop. Same for this one. The original has got that really weird blue tint to it, but colour corrected, it looks much more realistic. So the second sort of area we're going to look at is colour as motif. So this is much more theory-based. If you're writing your own films or short animations or whatever, or adverts, you'd be looking at how you're going to use colour within that. And it's a huge sort of theory base of its own. So I'm not going to go into much detail. I just wanted to show you a couple of examples so you know what I'm talking about. So this is classic film Schindler's List. And we're looking in the middle there at the girl in the red dress. And it's not very red, it's muted, it matches the rest of the scene, it doesn't stand out, but it's red enough to just draw your eye in as a tiny sort of, just pulling your eye in there. So you've got a point of focus, and she crops up repeatedly in the film, so you know that it gives you a feeling that something's not quite right. There's another example here where the colours are very bright and everything else is very saturated. That's from Pleasantville. And a classic example, which is from Margaret Atwood, Handmaid's Tale. And it's using red as the colour of passion and blood and so on. So there's lots of theory-based stuff in there. And so the important aspect to me as an editor, the bit that I want to really look at in post-production in Premiere Pro is colour grading. So things like the motif and the use of colour. You decide on that early on. The script writers or the product designers would have an idea as to what they wanted there. But in post-production, we look in particular at colour grading. And there's two reasons for this. One is, even if you're just making a sort of outdoor documentary, you might film something at 8 in the morning and something at 12, and the light would be very different. It won't look like a cohesive piece of film. It will look like different shots. And you could colour grade them so that they look like they've been taken at the same time. They've got continuity. They're both part of the same thing. And then the other is colour grading to give a particular look for a film. And this is quite an interesting thing, I think. So every film that you watch that's been produced in the last 20, possibly 30 years will have had some sort of colour palette attached to it. They won't just have gone out and filmed sort of in the wild, so to speak. So I'm looking at this one here. So this is stills from Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? You can see the colour palette they've used in the stills. Every frame in the movie will fit one of these colour palettes. Right down to the colours of the clothes they're wearing. That isn't just an accidental, they've been dyed that way, or that they've been faded out to that. Those colours will have been particularly picked from the colour palette, and then the clothes will be made up to match. So the blue of the dungarees, the stripy outfits, they're all within the colour palette. Okay, so another example, a really clear example, this one, the Joker. Every frame within the film will have come from this colour palette, or there's another one that contrasts with it. Everything's been carefully chosen for the colour. It hasn't just been put together out of the dressing up box. They've really thought through what these colours mean and why they're going to use them. What's the meaning for the yellow? What's the meaning for the red? Why the green? And this one here, blue and orange, which is kind of the new thing. Everything's blue and orange at the moment. And there's specific reasons for that. Blue and orange bring out the best in each other. Blue and orange really highlight skin tone and facial expression, and so that's that. That's a still from Edward Scissorhands, which is a good example. It's an 80s film, but the palette is all pastel. Everything that goes on in this film is pastel, apart from Edward Scissorhands himself, who wears this kind of shiny black leather PVC outfit with the black hair. And it's constantly contrasted in every scene, so it really brings forward the fact that he's different from everything else that's going on. Got this nice pastel American or sort of suburban scene, and then Edward Scissorhands. The Matrix is a classic example of colour grading. That green. Everything about the film has been coloured in the same way, right down to, if you look in the top left, there's the bonnet of a car just showing through, and a red car in front of that. And even those colours are from the colour palette. There's nothing that's been left to chance. Everything that people are wearing, everything that people have got, all the assets, they're all from the colour palette. Okay. And a final one from Grand Budapest Hotel. So again, everything is from this pink and red colour palette, every single scene. Okay. So some of those decisions are made, well, the decision to make it in those colours is made at the outset. And some of it is done with the props themselves, so they will be dressed in the right colours and so on. But at the end of the editing process, when everything's put together, they will be colour graded. So I'm going to bring you back to this slide that I showed you very early on when it didn't make much sense, so you can see where the colour grading fits in the post-production process. So we've got our media, we've assembled it in Premiere, and you know how to do that, we've been doing that. We'll do audio next week, I think. You add all your effects and graphics and stuff in After Effects, and we'll come back to that at the end of our Premiere Pro process. Then you go into the colour grading aspect, and then finishing and then export. So it's close to the end once you've got everything ready. Okay, any more slides? This slide that I remind you of every single week because it is really important, because Premiere Pro only saves links to your footage. It doesn't save your files themselves. Just a reminder for you there. Okay. So, oh, and I just wanted to show you this short film. It's only a couple of minutes. It's a good talk around colour in film. And I found this on, I get a lot of stuff from here, so No Film School is a brilliant resource for everything film anyway. But if you wanted to look in more depth at colour theory within film and colour grading and so on, if I can find the top of the page, No Film School, I've got some really interesting stuff. And Studio Binder is another website that always has some good stuff. Okay, so I'm just going to play you this, and then we'll do some Premiere Pro.
A room painted bright red? Might be hard, right?
I'm on no sleep. No sleep. You don't know what it's like in there.
Colors elicit emotions that have a psychological effect on people. So unless you're shooting in black and white, in which case definitely review our video on tone, this is the video for you. Because today, we're going to show you how colors can be used to create mood. But you can go beyond placing a blue tint over an entire sequence. You can determine specifically what type of blue you want. There are three factors in determining color. They are hue, which is the color itself, saturation, the intensity of the color, and brightness, how light or dark the color is. With just hue, saturation, and brightness, HSB for short, you can create a complex color scheme rather simply, and go from being just another director to being a true visual artist. First up, hue. Some movies choose an affinity of hue, utilizing a monochromatic color scheme. Those are just fancy ways of saying that a movie is mostly one color, or neighboring colors on a color wheel, also known as analogous colors. The Matrix is a classic example of a movie that mostly uses one color. That color? Green. Why? Well, the movie takes place inside of a digital matrix, and we associate green with code. Plus, the green in the Matrix has a certain sickly quality to it, reflecting the overall state of affairs in that world.
Welcome to the desert of the real.
Next up is the S in HSB, saturation. This movie used a post-production process called bleach bypass, which has a deeply desaturating effect. The color is drained out of these images. It gives the world of the movie a cold, raw, gritty sort of look. It also becomes reminiscent of the faded photographs, the black and white newsreels of the period itself. It takes us back in time. The final of the three is brightness. Earlier in this series, we covered brightness in terms of a film's overall tone, but brightness can be used to affect individual colors as well. Sometimes a movie elects to use entirely bright colors, particularly movies from the Technicolor era. Back then, bright, vivid colors were a reason to see the movies alone. On the other hand, during darker scenes like this, you could almost forget that this movie was shot in color. Now let's see what it's like when one movie does both.
When the destiny of a great fortune is at stake, men's greed spreads like a poison in the bloodstream.
It's using all darker colors. Contrast that with this scene, where all the colors are bright. In both instances, every element you see was chosen for its darker color, or lighter color to create a contrast within the film.
Wow.
So by utilizing hue, saturation, and brightness, you can precisely identify the right colors to create certain feelings in your audience. Bright images often seem lively and exciting. Darker images often seem dramatic, and on it goes. But rules were made to be broken.
I don't make the rules.
Okay, I'll make it as easy for you as I can.
You get to decide what the colors mean. It's your movie, it's your world, and so make it your color palette. How do you make a violent red, the color of blood, feel like something else? In Her, Spike Jonze uses red to connote love. He does it by associating the color with the lead, Theodore, as he searches for love and ultimately finds it in his operating system.
Hello, I'm here.
Oh,
Black is for bad guys like Darth Vader, right? Well, sure, until it's for Batman.
I'm Batman.
you get to make your own rules. Look at how Wes Anderson uses saturated colors to make otherwise mundane scenes about a family pop almost like a comic book, while actual comic book films ground their high-concept plots in gritty, realistic tones. With the wealth of options post-production now provides, it's easier than ever to control the color palette. Of course, color grading can be an expensive, lengthy process, and it rarely can make up for a project that lacked a thoughtful color design strategy in pre-production. Want to dive deeper? Check the link to grab our free Film Color Theory ebook for more examples of color schemes. And see how some of your favorite films designed their color palettes to elicit powerful moods. See you in the next video.
Okay, so I hope that just gave you a little bit of context to the whole idea of colour in film. So I'm going to move into Premiere. I've downloaded my folders of too many things on this laptop. Right. Got someone in the chat. Yes, there is audio. Beans. Can anyone else not hear the audio? Can everyone hear the audio? Can someone give me a yes? Fantastic. Okay, I thought it was me. I thought, oh no, I'm going to have to say all that again. Okay, so let's go back to Premiere. And I've got in that folder 3 more folders: colour correction, colour grading and colour match, and we're going to take one at a time and go through the different things within that. Okay, so I've got Premiere open. I'm going to make a new project. I'm going to stick it in my folder on the desktop that I've just made. So there it is, Premiere 4 colour, colour correction. See if I can shrink my face. Thank you. I could give it a name, and I'm going to say OK. So the first thing I'm going to do is get rid of all this stuff. So if I click on editing at the top, that will give me the workspace that I'm used to using, so the one that we used last week. And I'm going to import my media. So if I double click in the import media box, find my folder. I want this piece of footage here, skin colour. I'm going to import that. Okay, so if I just double click on that, you can see what I've got. It's a piece of, sort of ungraded, sort of bald, bland footage. And it's an interesting piece. It consists of lots of different clips that are stitched together. And generally, there's some quite similar colour schemes running through it, but the skin tones of each person are different, which makes it an interesting clip to work with. Okay, so what we want to do is brighten up all these people, so colour correct it, get everything to, this guy's looking quite green, so that needs to be corrected. This child, it's very dull. We could really make that skin tone much clearer against the yellow and the white and so on. So there's loads of different ways we could do this, and everyone will show you something different. I'm going to drag it onto the timeline, and if I come up here onto my menu bar here, I'm going to choose the colour workspace. So I'll talk you through this, and then I'll show you a better way or a different way of doing things. So the colour workspace has got this sort of mess on the left hand side, which is the metroscopes. I won't talk much through about this. It's something, if you are interested in editing or photography, it's something you would probably come back to, and we would look at it at a later stage. but just be aware that's what it is. So ignore the messy thing that goes on the left. It will change as you're going through. We've got our footage in the middle here, and then on the right hand side we've got the Lumetri colour panel. So if I start out with the first one, I've got basic correction, and in here are the typical things that you'd expect to have in Photoshop or any other editing software. So I can adjust the temperature of my clip. So heading towards warmer or cooler tones. You can do the same with the tint if I wanted to give her a green tint, but there are better ways to do this. But that is there if you wanted it. Exposure and so on. Contrast. Highlight, shadows and whites. And if you have a play around, you'll see what you get with those. You can just bring up different tonal areas. So I'm going to reset. Yeah. And there's a saturation as well at the bottom there. So if you want to work that way with that kind of control, you've got the option there. And you can also go into the curves, and you can play around in the same way as you would in Photoshop, so you've got these kind of skills. So you've got quite a few options in there. I'm not going to go through these because there's a more effective way of working if you don't know what they are. So rather than learn it all at this point in your lives, it would be easier for you to go to basic correction. And here we've got something called an input LUT. Let me just step back so we're back on the original piece of footage. Okay, so LUT stands for LUT, it's a lookup table, and it's a mathematical, scientific sort of way of taking the footage that you import and recalibrating it, and sort of correcting it via maths. And one of the benefits of doing it this way, if I show it done and then explain the benefit. So I'm just going to choose the first thing on the lookup table there, and straight away you can see that's such a difference. And if I go through, you'll see that that's actually changed all the colour across my clip for the better. Okay, so apart from this woman who looks a bit orange, that one's quite nice, that one looks great, that one looks good. That's a bit sepia, but we can probably do something about that. He looks much better and less sickly. He has much more colour. She has lipstick and much more definition on her face. He's brighter. There's a little bit orange there. They're much better, and she's much better. So that's applied. Although it's applied to the whole clip, it takes every frame and it just adjusts it slightly differently. If we wanted to do the whole clip by hand, with temperature and balance and curves and so on, we'd have to split the clip up into lots of small pieces, because anything I apply to the clip, I'll change the exposure, it's applied to the whole clip. And actually each section of this is going to need a different set of balance. So she would need one thing, they would need another, and so on. So I'd have to actually cut the clip up into little chunks and then adjust each one. And instead I can just use the lookup. So there are hundreds of these available to download on the internet, and if you're using a specific camera, you can usually find one that will adjust the footage that you've taken. So if, for example, you take out one of the Canon 500s from here and use that, you can download the lookup table for the Canon 500, and it will already understand, it will be able to interpret the footage that you've taken and adjust that. Okay. So that is basic colour correction. There's a lot more to it if you want it to be, but that is plenty for you, I think. I mean, I get by without knowing much more than that. So everyone comfortable up till now? Okay, remember, you can ping in the chat if you want me to stop or go back over something. It's hard to know how you're doing online because I can't see you. So that skin tone, I'm going to delete that and get rid of it and import some more media. If I move back to my folder, this time I'm going to go in the colour grading folder, and there's six pieces of footage in here, so I'm just going to bring all those pieces in. So you can see there I've got 6 pieces of footage, and although a couple are quite similar in tone, some of them are totally different. We've got this bright sky. The helicopter footage at the beginning is really overexposed and totally different tones to everything else. There's a weird blue cast on this, and also we go from in shadow to bright light, so there's some different things happening on these pieces of footage. And I want to put them together into a film so that it looks like they've all been done at the same time. So I'm going to use that. I could do each thing individually, but I'm not going to. I'm going to find the first clip. So I'm going to start with this clip of the child in the pushchair. Just partly because it's important to get the face colouring and things right. If he's gone green or orange or whatever, then I need to rethink. So I want to get his face colour right. So I'm going to start with him and put him on the timeline. Then if I come over to my Lumetri colour panel, I'm going to look in creative, and I could actually start by giving it a basic correction with the input look. So I'm under basic correction here, not creative, and just pick Alex is quite good and Ari is quite good, but I think Alexa suited that clip a bit better. Okay, so I've put an automatic effect on there that's adjusted my white balance, the exposure, lightened some of the shadows, dealt with some of the bright areas, and just generally cleaned it up. It's much sharper than the original we have here on the left. The blue is bluer, the green is greener. So that, and now I'm going to get a second piece of footage. So I'm going to choose this piece to demonstrate, which is already very similar in tone to the first piece. So if you look at the two pieces here, the sand colour it's tonally very similar. The blues, you can pick out the same colours across the footage. So I want to do that to both bits. So on my main window here, you may have this icon, comparison view. If you've got it, it will be at the end of this strip. If it's not there, you can click on the plus, the button editor, and it will be somewhere in here. So we're looking for this one, comparison view. It's two little squares, one over the other. And then if I click on that, it gives me a sort of set of 2 clips, and I'll explain how this works. So this can only be used to compare 2 separate clips. It's not comparing a clip with itself. So any effect I add onto it won't be compared with itself. So the first window is a point on the timeline that I'm taking a reference clip. So it could be anywhere. I've got 2 clips on there, and it could be anywhere across the 2 clips. So where do I want my reference image to come from? I might choose there. And then the second frame is the point on the timeline that I'm working at. I'm going to come back to basic creation, and just add an LUT to the input there. And that's brightened up my right hand clip, so I've now got sort of quite a nice match colour-wise with the bright colours. If I come back to creative, I can go through the colour tables. So we've got input LUTs, which correct things, and creative output LUTs, which change the grade of things. So I could go through there and find something I like the look of, and then apply it to both clips. So that is SL Clean Fuji. So if I come back to my original clip, I'm going to apply the same thing to that. And now I need to do a little bit of work because it's kind of washed out in the middle there. But you can pick out the colours that match. There's a definite colour grade happening there. And if I don't like that one, I could find something that fits a bit better. Let's okay, so I've chosen golden orange there, and that started to sort of pick out the best colours in both of those clips. So I would then go along the rest of my film pieces, toning them and trying to get them all to match up, which sometimes can be a difficult run. So this next clip here, okay, this one's going to be quite hard because it goes from, we're looking at the clip on the right hand side there, and it comes out of the shadow into the light. So we've got two sort of lots of colour to work with there. So I can start with my basic correction. I know I'm using Alexa, the first Alexa default, so let's add that. It's made it go very blue. I could cool it using the temperature of the white balance. I may go back and not choose that input because it really has overcorrected the blue. And then I could find my LUT, and I can't remember what I used. So SL Gold Orange. Okay, so you might get away with that, you might be happy with that. You might want something different because it is very blue. So I might want to just clean it out a bit. Okay, so I've taken saturation down there quite a bit. And I've got some control over the adjustments as well, so I could come into the colour wheel down here and just start moving things around. So what have I got now? Okay, so I'll just keep going with my different bits of footage until I had everything the way I wanted. Obviously the beach sunset is markedly different, and so you can see from this selection of clips that there's enough variety, I think, to make it quite challenging to regrade everything. And the helicopter is going to be pretty difficult as well. I want to show you another way of doing it, and I'm going to show you an example first, a really obvious example, so that you can see what I mean. So I'm going to go back into the folders, and I'm just looking in colour match. There's two clips in there, a black and white guitar and a colour guitar. Just going to drag those in onto the timeline. Okay, so I've got a colour guitar and I've got a black and white guitar there. And I'm in comparison view, so this button here will put you in comparison view. I'm going to choose a frame on the first clip, the coloured clip, that I want to compare my colour match with. So maybe there, I just want to make sure it's got some face with some highlight and a bit of colour. So that clip rather than sort of one where he's ducked right down. And then move the timeline along to the other one, so I've got the black clip. I'm going to go to colour wheels and match in the colour panel. And I've got comparison view up already. I've ticked face detection because I want it to pick up these highlights and shadows on the face. And I'm going to choose apply match. Okay. And it has. So I'm showing you this one because I think it's a really good example of how strongly it works. You know, I mean, if you can take something coloured with such vibrant, intense colour and then apply it to something black and white that's totally desaturated, you can see how well it works. And I could go back in and adjust some of the tones if I wanted. So I'm just putting in some shadows there. But for the most part, it's pretty good. So I'm just going to get rid of that and come back to my original clips. So I've got one of the clips here, beginning, and on the other side I've got the beach sunset. I've selected the beach sunset and I'm going to try and do a comparison with those two clips, so apply match. Okay, so I'm not too sure about that, but I might find a different frame that's got something more compatible. So I've got this red here. I'll try that instead. Okay, so it's picked out. You can see, I know this is hard to see on your computer screens because it's already a lot smaller than mine. But you can pretty much match up some of the sandy colours. So this reddy colour here, you can pick out of here. The blues, this silvery colour, they're all within the buildings. The orange colour of the sky and the sand can be picked out from here. The reddy colour there is tonally sort of what I'm seeing along the cloud line there, so along the tree line there. It won't look as clear on your computers because it's gone from one to the other. So that is colour match. So between the three things there, you've got three different ways to colour. colour correction, colour grading and colour match, and some nice bits to export. Okay, anyone got any questions so far? Where's the chat box gone? Okay, so I'm going to assume that no one has got any questions so far. Like I say, this is recorded, so you can go back over it at a slower pace when you're ready. I'm just going to get rid of this. It's worth, colour grading is worth spending time on, because done well you get some really lovely effects, and the idea is no one would know that different cameras, different people, different lights, different places, things had all been taken differently. So I've got one more sort of exercise to do, because it's much quicker working online, because I can't sort of see if you're doing it or not, than it is for the in-person session. So I'll come back to my drive, and this time we're going to get Premiere 7, the folder Premiere 7 blend modes, and download that. I'm just going to do some playing with blends. Okay, so in Premiere 7 blend modes there are 4 pieces of footage, and I'm going to grab all of them and bring them in. I'm going to go back to the editing workspace just so I've got some sort of space. I don't know why this kid in the pushchair won't go away. It seems to be permanency. So what I've got here are 4 clips, 2 children, and we'll use one at a time, we don't need to use both, and then 2 pieces of footage with bubbles. So one is just some hand-drawn bubbles animated in After Effects, and one is sort of video footage of bubbles in the air. And then there's a girl with bubbles and a boy without. So if I play through the girl with bubbles, what I'm aiming to do, and this is quite difficult to describe in words because it's such a visual sort of concept, is the idea of depth within film. At the moment, what we've got there is a piece of filmed footage from an angle, and it's quite flat, even though it's got the bubbles, and film is always going to be 2D, film is flat. It has very little depth to it, and I want to make it more interesting, sort of multi-layered, so that it's got more, so the colours pop a bit better, everything's just a bit more exciting. And it's kind of, it is a concept that's difficult to explain, so I'm going to show you. I'm going to drag the video down into my timeline. So that is on the bottom layer. Things around a bit so we can see. And I'm going to get one of these pieces of footage with the shiny bubbles on. There we go. Okay, so that's on top. And I want to combine the two so that you can see the girl through the first one. So if I come up to the top left and choose Effect Controls and drop down the key for opacity, in here we've got something called blend mode. If you're familiar with Photoshop, you will have used blend modes probably. There's a whole list of different ways to add or subtract one piece of footage from another. Photoshop will let you see in real time as you scroll over them. Premiere doesn't do that. You have to click and choose. So that's darken. So it's kind of giving some extra bubbles there. So multiply, that gives a little bit more. And I'm hoping you can kind of see on your screens what I mean about giving it a bit more depth, a bit more 3D-ness. Okay, so it shows multiply there, but there's lots of different ways that you could add a blend. And you just have to go through and find the right one for the clips you've got, so every set of clips will combine differently. I'm going to come back now and get the next piece of footage, which is this hand-drawn animated bubbly piece of footage. And do the same thing, I'm select it, go to the effect controls and apply a blend. And I'm going to put a screen on that because it will lighten it up a little bit. And that just gives an extra sort of layer of interest to the image. Now, you may or may not want to go for a sort of cartoony look, and that is quite cartoony. So what I could do is scale down what I've got there. And I could keyframe it to move with my bubbles. So it's keyframed in just the way we did last week. And it just adds an extra little bit of interest to what I'm doing. Yeah, get rid of those and bring in the other piece of footage, the little boy. So he doesn't have any bubbles, which is very sad. Everyone should have bubbles. So we're going to give him some. So I'm going to grab the bubble footage, left click it, scale it up because it doesn't quite fit. And then in the blend modes, I'm going to choose multiply. I think it's probably best. Okay, so you can see he's got some bubbles there. I've gone a bit bluish around the edge, so I might want to pick a different. And then I'm doing some hand-drawn bubbles over the top. Scale up a bit so it fits. Select that one. So again, I could scale that. I could rotate. I could have them moving around or whatever. I could layer them up. Okay, so it's a really nice way of just adding some interest to what you're doing. Okay, come back to images. Right, I have people back. Okay, so has anyone got any questions? I'm going to stop there with the technical stuff because I like to keep the morning and the afternoon group together. I know you haven't had much time to go through that as I've been talking, but it's very difficult to know when people are ready to move on. So I'm going to stay online till 3:30, so it's about 40 minutes. So you can practice online and come back, speak to me through Zoom, ping in the chat or whatever, if you need help with anything specific, and that's probably the best way for us to work. Okay, so if you've got any questions, feel free to ask questions. If you're finished or you don't want to work anymore, or you've got other things to do, feel free to go. If you want to stay back and ask any questions, please do. And if you're just going to follow along, you want me to go through things again, please say so. So I am here for you. Actually, before you go, next week we will look at masks and blends and things. The morning group, I'm going to bring some stuff in to do projection mapping, or just to demonstrate projection mapping. So, but that's not something we can do online. So if you want to see that, come in the morning. There's always room, plenty of room. Okay, if not, I'll see you in the afternoon. And then the following week we'll do audio. Okay, so any questions from anybody? Thank you. Fab, thank you. Will do. It is a beautiful day. Go out and enjoy the fresh air.